Hi, Pat.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm okay.
Good.
Saying
Chris?
that I'm still seeing you means I still don't have a job yet.
Yeah. It's one of those bittersweet things when folks move on and they no longer come to see me.
Yeah.
Hi, Tao. Chris. How you guys doing?
Hello. Hi,
Good.
doing great.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I said doing great. It's my first time. One
Oh,
of my
good.
friends
Welcome.
and it.
Welcome. I'm glad you made it. So, how did you find out about this? Was it through LinkedIn or through Never Search Alone?
It's a, and never search alone.
Okay, awesome. Well, welcome, welcome. We're gonna let some folks trickle in here. I do this every week, and it's been evolving a little bit, and based on some of the feedback I've been receiving. So, anyway, I hope you can get something meaningful out of it, Tal. Let's see. Okay. Hi, Leo, Shiloh, Mendel, Jen. I try to make this interactive, so if you are able to show your face, I'd love to see it. If not, understand. Um, So I'll just kick this off without further ado. I assume that most of you have some context for why I'm doing this, so I won't give too much detail. But I do this every week, really to give back to the job seeking community, um, and this has evolved over the past few months that I've been doing this. Most recently, initially it started out as just sort of a free form AMA, which I think a lot of folks got some stuff out of it. But I think what I've found based on feedback is that um, uh, the group would get a little bit more with a little bit more structure. And so over the past few weeks, I've been adding a little bit more structure or themes around sort of the discussion. I do want to make it interactive and continue to make it interactive because, um, there's an energy that comes about in a group when people engage. And I feel like more people, particularly me, uh, myself, I get more out of it when I feel like there's more interaction. So I don't want this to be like a lecture. And by all means, do I not know? By all means, I do not know everything, but I do know something, and I hope I can share that with you and hopefully make it relevant. So, why don't we just kick this off? Today, I want to talk a little bit about how you can incorporate AI into your job search. Um, as a job seeker, I know there's a lot of things that can be automated. And so, what I wanted to share with you today is one approach for automation. And so I'll go through a little slide deck and I will show you hands-on Claude for Sheets. So Claude is a product from Anthropic, which is one of the big competitors out there as far as large language models. And Claude for Sheets is, how would you say, it's an application or an extension, a tool that allows you to integrate access to Claude's large language models through Google Sheets. Okay. And so what I want to show you today is just give you a little bit of intro on it. Um, I will, I will, I will allow time at the end to address any questions that are just general job search, recruiter related questions. So I would ask if you sort of defer that towards the end. But if you have any questions about what we're talking about here with respect to AI, with respect to Claude for Sheets, automation, and so forth, by all means, uh, just holler out if you have the question, or if you don't feel comfortable with that, you can put it in the chat as well, the Zoom chat. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here and just walk you through a little deck. Um, let's see. My decks are nothing fancy. In fact, I try to just keep it simple and just really try to focus on the content. Okay. So so a few assumptions here. I assume that you are all looking for your next opportunity. You all have some experience with generative AI in terms of like playing with ChatGPT, so you understand sort of prompting to some degree and getting a response. I assume that most of you have some experience with spreadsheets. either Google Sheets or Excel. And then I assume that you have some interest in streamlining your workflow, particularly your job search workflow. And I'm going to show this in the context of a job search workflow, actually a slice of a job search workflow. But a lot of this can be extended to any part of your job search workflow. In fact, it can be extended to really any kind of workflow that you might have. And so one thing I would encourage you to think about is, how you might be able to integrate this into your own, your own area of expertise, whether it's product management, graphic design, project management, what have you, right? And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is completely extendable into all these other areas. Okay. Oh, by the way, can you guys see my screen? Sorry. Give a thumbs up if you guys can see my screen. Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So objectives. Today, we're not going to try to boil the ocean here. What I want to do is introduce you to the power of prompting within a spreadsheet. I want to demonstrate the application of a job search related workflow. My non-objectives here are to turn you into some sort of prompting expert, some spreadsheet expert, or explain all of the minutiae or details of actually setting this up, right? There's a lot of resources out there, and I'll point you to some of those at the end. I'll send this deck along as well as the spreadsheet that I've created. Okay. So I'll find this session successful if you're able to walk away inspired to learn more and to apply this to your job search, and also to imagine how you might apply this to your area of expertise. Okay. This is very relevant with respect to the actual job search, but also if you haven't dove deeper into generative AI and how it could enhance what you do as a professional, I'm hoping that this could spark some of that curiosity. Okay. And if we accomplish that in this half-hour, 45-hour session, I would think it's a success. Okay. Okay. So why integrate AI into spreadsheets versus just using a chat interface? Okay. So here's some of the things. If you find yourself repeatedly performing the same conversations within ChatGPT, moving your conversation into a spreadsheet becomes much more scalable. Okay. If you're anything like me and you had these conversations with ChatGPT and you're forgetting how to write the prompt, or you're forgetting, maybe you spent, a lot of time like refining a prompt, and now you have the same question or the same conversation you want to have, but maybe in a different context. Now you have to type the prompt all over again, or maybe copy and paste it if you have some sort of way of managing your prompt library, but that can get really cumbersome, right? And so that's one reason to integrate this into spreadsheets. Or if you find that your prompts are becoming more sophisticated, right, and it's a pain to keep typing them out, or you want to perform the same prompting in a consistent manner, but with different inputs, right? Those are all reasons to move your prompting into spreadsheets, okay? So the agenda today is I'm going to talk a little bit about a few AI and spreadsheet concepts. I'm hoping this can go no more than half an hour, but if you guys have questions and it goes longer, great. I'm not concerned about that. Again, I do want to leave some time towards the end to just address sort of the general recruiting related, job search related questions that are beyond some of the AI stuff we're going to talk about here today. Okay. Okay. So few concepts. Okay. So we'll talk about a few concepts here: prompting, prompt assembly, prompting in a spreadsheet, Claude models, and just API calls. I'm going to gloss over some of this because I don't want to get too technical. Again, if you guys have questions and you want to go deeper, let's do it. But I want to keep it a little bit higher level as well, right? Okay. So a simple prompt example, right? And this is probably related. I'm sure many of you have had the same sort of prompt that maybe you've done on your own resume, but right? You get a job description that looks interesting, and you pop this into ChatGPT. Where does my resume align or possibly misalign with a job description? Super simple prompt, right? Very limited context. I mean, obviously, you're going to provide your resume. You're going to provide the job description, whether that's in the form of a link or maybe you're copying and pasting the job description right into the chat. But super simple prompt example, right? Here's a little bit more of a sophisticated prompt, right? And again, I assume that some of you have seen sort of this format. This is what we call. Let me make this bigger. This stuff is what we call Markdown. And when you put prompt inputs, when you format prompts with using Markdown, it makes it easier for you to read as a writer, but it also makes it easier for the GPT to read, right? And these are just sort of ways that you can organize your prompt. But this is much more sophisticated, right? And so the idea is that as you are doing the same prompt over and over, what will end up happening is that your prompt will become, you'll start to refine your prompt more and more, so that your response from the GPT, gets closer to what you're looking for. And so using this approach of integrating it into spreadsheets allows you to sort of manage the refinement of the prompts over time. Okay. So this is just an example. I'm not going to go through this in detail. Again, I'll share this with everyone so you guys can have access to it. But again, stop me if you have any questions. Actually, I need to pop into the chat here to see if anyone has any questions. Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. So one thing is prompt assembly. So if you look back here, there's a giant prompt. One thing I'm doing here is I'm inserting the job description into this area, right? And I'm inserting the resume into here. And basically, it's just a substitution in Google Sheets. But the idea is that you can assemble a prompt, and I'll show you an example of this. So don't worry if it's too complicated. You're basically assembling a giant prompt with different inputs. And the input here is the job description and the resume. Okay. And that's what's happening. We're using a substitute function in Google Sheets. Okay. Okay. So prompting in a spreadsheet, right? Everyone, I mean, I would assume that most people have seen sort of this interface. This is basically OpenAI's Chat GPT interface. It's like a chatbot, right? You ask it questions in natural language and it responds. And what we're doing now is we're asking we're interfacing with the LLM through a spreadsheet. Okay. Okay. Some concepts here in terms of calling Claude and LLM models. So again, Claude is a product of Anthropic, and there's 3 different models, and they have different capabilities. And some of you may have heard of this. So Opus 3, Sonnet 3.5, and Haiku. And so Haiku is like, if you think about the poems, right? Haiku is a short and sweet. And sonnets are longer, and opuses are, I guess, giant epics, right? So that's sort of the metaphor or analogy there. But Haiku is used for fast, it's cheap, right? It's like a quarter per million tokens. Sonnet, it's more intelligent. It's about 12x the cost of Haiku. And then Opus, it's highly complex. It's about 60x the cost of Haiku, right? And tokens are really, it's a form of like how you measure the length of your prompt, the length of your request, and then the length of the response, right? So, and then the temperature has to do with how creative or how random the GPT will interpret your request and how it'll formulate its response. And so these are input parameters when you're calling the model. And again, I'll show you this in the spreadsheet. But this is kind of what it looks like in the spreadsheet. And then max tokens. So a lot of times I'm not really fumbling with temperature or max tokens. You just configure. I usually just start with Haiku. It's the fastest, it's the cheapest, and usually it's good enough, right? If you find that it's getting confused or you're not getting the answers you need, you could try bumping it up, or you could try refining your prompt, right? And just as sort of a benchmark, 2,000 tokens is equivalent to about 3 single space pages of regular text. Okay. So a quarter for 1 million tokens, that's a lot, right? It's pretty cheap. Okay. Okay. Let's see. So I want to give you an example of a workflow. Okay. So here's an example workflow. So if you find a job posting that you're interested in, you may compare that job description with your resume, right? And ask it, you may interrogate it and ask it like, oh, where am I strong for this position, or where might I be a misfit, right? So you might analyze the JD for archetypes. Last week we talked about archetypes, and you get a sense of like what the hiring manager or the job description is calling for in terms of what they're looking for in candidates. Select 3 bullet points from the resume that align with the archetypes derived from the job description. Write an email outreach message and write a LinkedIn outreach message. So this is just an example of a job search workflow. I just made this up. But depending on the steps that you might take when you find a job that you're interested in, you can obviously build that out and then you can start to automate that, right? Okay, so here's what I want to show. We'll look at these 3 steps, and for each of or these 5 steps, for each of these 5 steps, there's a related prompt that can help you get to where you're trying to go. Okay, so I want to show this to you in Sheets. Okay, so again, I'm going to share this with you guys, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you guys might have as you come across it. But if you look at the different steps, what I've done here in this worksheet is I've enumerated the steps. So compare job description with resume, analyze job description for archetypes, select 3 bullet points from resume that align with the archetypes, write an email outreach message, and then write a LinkedIn outreach message. Okay. And then the prompts are, these are the prompts here. Okay. And so this is sort of you can think of this as the prompt library. So the idea is that you have these prompts, and anytime you want to refine it and change it, you just change it into here. And it's already propagated throughout the rest of the usage in the next worksheet. Okay, so that's what's nice about it. Okay, so let me show you the input for the resume. I did ask for volunteers when I posted this up in the Never Search Alone community, but I didn't get any volunteers. So I'm just using basically my resume in Markdown. I don't have a resume, but I have a LinkedIn profile. So I basically exported that LinkedIn profile to a PDF. I uploaded it to ChatGPT and asked it to reformat it as far as Markdown. And so again, Markdown is a formatting structure that the GPTs really prefer and they really like. And so I pasted it into here. And don't worry, like the maximum character length for Google Sheets for a given cell is something in the order of like 50,000 characters. And so, this resume here is something like 5,000 characters. So you could put a lot of stuff in one cell. Okay. So that's the resume in Markdown, and that'll get referenced here. I'll show you in a second. Okay. I hope this is not too complicated. Don't feel intimidated. I know there's a lot going on here, and I'll explain it. Let me just show you here. So each of those stages or questions that I had described is in these tan fields. Okay. And so compare job description with resume, right? And so what I have here is the resume. I'm sorry, the job description, which I pasted into here. And I have basically a call to Claude that is passing in this prompt. And so I'll make this a little bit bigger here so you guys can see it. So what you see here is this prompt that is from here, and it's in here, right? So I'm assembling the prompt, adding the job description, and adding the resume. It's just basically a substitution thing that's going on here. Okay. And so basically it's getting assembled here, and then and then we have a call to Claude passing in this prompt. Okay, so if you look at the response here, it's hard to see, but what I'll do is I'll paste it. I'll paste it into here so you guys can see it better. So basically the prompt is asking for a lot, where, can you compare this job description with my resume, right? And so it gives me this, and this is everything that I specified in my prompt. I want to know where there was alignment, and I want to know where there's misalignment. Okay. And so I repeat this down, 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 and each of the inputs are different, right? These are all different job descriptions, right? So here's one for a warehouse worker, right? So it's a pretty long job description. I pasted it into here. And then if you look at the response, so if you look at some of the misalignment, right? And these could be really interesting for you guys as you look at opportunities that are, that might be a little bit of a stretch. You can have this prompt analyze it based on your resume and find the areas where there might be misalignment, right? So for example, this job is part-time, hourly associate position, while Eric's experience is primarily in senior leadership and executive roles, right? And so this is a great way to kind of pull out where there might be divergence in terms of your background, what you might be looking for, and the actual role or the job description, right? And so the beauty of this is the same prompt. The inputs are different here. Let me just zoom in a little bit. So the input here is the job description, right? The input into this prompt is different for each row. And so basically you can replicate this prompt across a bunch of different rows, and each row corresponding to, a new job description, right? And then so the same thing I'm doing with this second prompt, right? And so anyway, it's a really powerful way to do things at scale with different inputs, right? In this case, our input is a resume, which is fixed, but we also have an input as a job description. And the job description, again, for each row, the job description is different, right? So I'll stop there. If you guys have any questions, I want to make sure I'm sort of speaking at a
Eric,
level.
I've noticed when using a series of prompts in an area that I have of expertise, the way maybe you have expertise here in recruiting, are there things that stand out to you in response that don't quite match what you would do as a human? Are you able to see some things as being higher quality and other responses as lower quality? Or do you find that they're more or less, it's high enough quality for the job search results that we're looking for?
So with respect to quality, that is where you have to sort of calibrate, right? You have to take sort of this iterative approach, right? And so as a first pass, right, I might have a fairly unsophisticated prompt. And what you'll get, and this is the beauty of this, right, is that you can very quickly get feedback across different inputs so that you can refine your prompt much more quickly. So if you're not getting what you're looking for, first of all, you have to make sure that you're doing this loop, right? Because there's hallucination. There's some of these things like temperature and managing the token count and even the model, right? If you look at these things up here, these are some of the parameters that are going into the API call, into the Claude prompt call, right? So if you look at this, I'm specifying max tokens, temperature, and here it's just easy to configure this, right? I can put this to 0.2 or whatever. But the point is that you need to take a really iterative approach. So you test this a few times, and if your result is getting close to what you're looking for, you're on the right track. But if it's still pretty far, you might have to be more specific in your prompting. And so what's beautiful about this is that if I find that I'm not getting what I'm looking for in this result here, I go back to my prompt and then I can refine it, right? And so I didn't just write this prompt like in one shot. It took me at least several iterations of seeing what it produced and looking at those results and being like, okay, well, I need to refine, what the output looks like. I need to tell it not to make stuff up. This is a pretty common guideline that you might want to include. Like, don't make stuff up. Make sure that it's citable, right? It's referencing your resume or referencing the job description. Because a lot of times it'll come up with plausible results that if you're not checking it, it's easy to believe, right? And so, be concise, no preamble. These are things that again, some of these things just from my own experience, I've just incorporated. But if you're starting from scratch, regardless, if you're starting from scratch or you feel like you have a pretty strong prompt, still take an iterative approach to seeing what the prompt results in, and then vary the inputs, right? So for example, I probably wouldn't, if I were looking for a job, I probably wouldn't be applying to a warehouse worker job. That's just right. But what you could do is, put something that there, change the input such that it's sort of off the wall a little bit, and then just see what the prompt produces, what it returns, right? And so take an iterative approach, but the thing that you're refining here is the prompting, right? And you have a nice way to refine the prompt, and to the extent that you refine it, it'll give you better results over time. So hopefully that answers your question, Matthew.
Yes, the major part of it. Thanks.
Okay.
Um,
Okay,
I, I
cool.
asked I asked in part because I know that when we come in, we have this almost blinded view of ourselves as candidates and what we're familiar with. And you have the recruiting perspective where you'll have a broad expertise there. And I want to be sure we don't accidentally miss something because we're focusing on ourselves first and foremost.
Yeah. I've used these GPTs as a sounding board in so many ways, right? And you could formulate a prompt that says, to act as a hiring manager or recruiter for this position, and the thing is you can get really creative, right? And I think what I'm proposing here with Claude for Sheets is, um, as you get more creative, you can add structure to harnessing that creativity, right? And that's what I found to be really powerful with this. So, I see a few questions coming in here. Does it matter if it's using GPT or ChatGPT versus Claude? Um, I think there are ChatGPT or OpenAI plugins. I just haven't used them yet, but I would imagine they work similarly. But I found Cloud for Sheets to be really, pretty powerful. And people start to have now a preference for the LLMs that they like to use. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a whole other thing to go into. Hi, Eric. This is not related to AI, but have you done a video on job search strategies on LinkedIn? Not per se, but we can talk a little bit about that later. Jason, is it possible to use Claude to do some type of scoring based on certain criteria? For example, how strong of a fit is my background? Yeah, totally. Totally. I mean, it's just how creative you get with the prompting, right? You can ask it to create a score. So the big thing, right? One of the big things, let's take a look at the prompts really quick. One of the big things that you can do is providing examples, right? And if you provide examples, it'll get so much closer to what you're looking for. So for example, if you scroll down to, write a LinkedIn outreach message, right? So this, I'm asking it to ask as a seasoned digital marketer with a knack for writing highly compelling and engaging messages for LinkedIn. But here I'm providing an example, right? And this could be refined, right? I could provide multiple examples, but here's an example of the structure that I'd like to see, right? And so to your point, Jason, like if you were trying to create some sort of prompt that will help give some sort of scoring to a job description based on its evaluation or comparison to your resume, you can give it some examples, right? Like I gave you an example earlier about a warehouse job, right? You might even give that as an example that, on a score, whatever, a score of 1 to 10, 1 to 5, whatever you conceive of, maybe that for me is a 1, right? Whereas maybe a product manager role or recruiting role might be a 4 or 5, something like that, right? And so giving examples is really powerful when it comes to prompting. Um, let's see. As a recruiter, do you use this to evaluate candidates where the resume? Yeah. So Shiloh, that's a good question. We do some high volume recruiting for our virtual assistant arm of our practice. And a lot of these folks are offshore. A lot of how we interact with these offshore talent and how our clients interact with them is through email. So one thing that we're doing right now is we are engaging with them via email in a bit of an automated sequence. You can think of like an automated email drip campaign, but instead we're asking them questions and then we're taking their responses and we're having GPT look at it. And it's helping us to inform, how we can sort and sort of disposition certain candidates. And so it gives us an opportunity to kind of refine that model. That model is not entirely refined, but we've used it in the past for some high volume recruiting. And it really, we were, I think out of like 70 applicants, around 70 applicants, we were able to scoop off the top based on our scoring criteria. As an example, some of the scoring criteria had to do with, asking GPT to evaluate the writing level of the candidate, like 5th grade, 10th grade, college, what have you. And so that was like one of the sort of dimensions we were looking at, their ability to write. And then, the GPT is really good at like fleshing out typos or grammatical errors, right? And so we were able to correlate a sort of a scoring scheme for that as well, right? And so you start layering that on top of each other, and now um, uh, you can start to stack rank some of the folks. And we have another algorithm too that we implemented using AI that had to do with categorization, which actually removes bias from from a from a it removes bias from the hiring manager in terms of their preferences. And so, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to kind of talk a little bit more about that. Um, let's see, will I share this? Yeah, I'll share it. Yes, I'll provide access to the spreadsheet. Okay, cool. Yeah, if you guys have any questions, just drop them in. Happy to explore them, or just holler too. Old school way. Okay. So that's that. And so once you're able to craft your prompts, then you get your results here. And now what you can do, and again, when I share this with you, you guys can sort of tweak this however you want. Make a copy of it and tweak it however you want. So if I want to add more rows, all I do is just drag and drop. I just drag it, right? So, and then I can add more inputs here, right? So the idea is that I've created this structure where I have relative and absolute cell references. So then when you start to drag and drop, it becomes, you could basically scale this for as many inputs as you want to do it, right? So very powerful stuff. Well, right at the bottom of the hour. Okay. So yeah, I hope that's helpful. There's also some prompting examples in here. I mean, there's a million sort of examples of, everybody has their own recipe for how to write a great prompt. I don't know if there's any one single best way to do it, but as you start to look at some of what's out there, you can kind of formulate your own sort of style for prompting. But yeah, that's all I've got on the Claude for Sheets side. Does anyone have any questions? Again, I'll make this available. Does anybody have any questions about Claude for Sheets, AI, or how this might be able to be used?
This is Shiloh, and this is amazing. But question for you, as a
Yeah.
user, as just a regular job seeker out there playing with ChatGPT, do I need to know anything about Claude? Because I have no idea about Claude.
Yeah, I think so. Claude has its own interface, just like ChatGPT, and for most folks, using that sort of chat style interface, most people are comfortable with, right? This is just another interface for interfacing with, those Anthropic's large language models. And so you don't need to know anything per se about Claude to get value out of this. I think the only thing that you might need to know is just that there are different models. Obviously, you'd have to go through a setup, right? So if you want, I'll share this with everyone, and I'll provide you with some resources. Here are the resources. I'll share this deck with everyone as well. But there's a bunch of resources here in terms of how to set this up. And the tutorials and the step-by-step, it's very easy. It's very easy. If you guys have any questions, let me know, because I've done this a million times already. But I think the big thing was, once you set this up, is you'll notice that your prompts will become much more refined and sophisticated. I don't know how many of you guys, just raise your hands, have used like custom GPTs or created your own custom GPTs in OpenAI or ChatGPT. Yeah, okay. A few of you guys. Yeah, so that's pretty easy to do, right? And it's one way to kind of, customize the interface a little bit. So this is taking it to the next level, right? And so, again, this is super powerful stuff. It might, yeah. I don't know if that helps, Shiloh.
Yes, it does. It does. So I need to go out and learn a little bit more about Claude. I need to at least put the extension on my Chrome, right?
Yeah, I would start with these resources right here.
Okay.
So Claude for Sheets, the Chrome extension, And then there's some documentation here that just walks you through it. It's their documentation is really simple. Yeah. So one thing you'll have to do is you'll have to sign up for an account, and it's a paid account, but it's based on usage, right? And so I think the minimum you can put on there is like $5 or $10, and it goes a long way. It goes a long way. But I'll just caution people out there. I wasn't using Claude for Sheets for like the past month, and I got this email saying that I've been using it. So I went to go look at my usage, and it kind of freaked me out because somehow it was getting used. Somehow it was getting used without me knowing. And I'm still trying to crack the nut there on what was going on. I don't know if somebody stole my API key and was using it. But anyway, just be careful of that. If you start creating API keys, just don't let them float around out there, because I don't know why I was getting charged for that. Anyway. Any other questions related to Claude for Sheets, APIs, sort of the approach here?
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting this today, but fantastic.
Yeah, I hope this is helpful. This is a bit of a departure from my normal AMA thing I got going on here on Thursdays, but I thought it was so valuable because I've gotten so much value out of this, in terms of just automating stuff. So this is like, if you think about like ChatGPT and that chat interface as being sort of first level, this is sort of the next level, or next level up. I don't know, next level up, right? And then obviously if you're a developer and you're touching code and you're writing Python code, you can do all of this and more, but this is sort of the next level, right? And so it's really powerful. So if any of you end up, implementing some of this stuff, I'd love to hear kind of the stories and kind of what you end up using it for and whatnot. But anyway, again, I'll share this with everyone in the follow-up email that I send out. But I do want to leave a little bit of time to just address any questions that folks might have. Yes, Liza, you do need a paid Claude account. And I think the minimum is like $10, and it's all consumption based. So cool. All right. Does anybody have any questions about anything else? I'm happy to spend a little bit of time here. Yeah, stop sharing my screen. Can you guys still see my screen? Okay, stop share. Okay, there it is. Okay, perfect. All right, any questions? Guys, what are you guys dealing with right now that Liza?
Yeah, I have a unrelated to this question, like a more along the general questions we talk about. It kind of came up, I think, in the last couple of calls that you had. But one question that I had is that in the more like traditional, tell me about yourself, but tell me about your strengths and weaknesses. I never understood how to talk about like your weaknesses, like when asked like directly. Not that it happens very often, and I don't fully understand the point of that question. I mean, because nobody really answers it honestly. Like honestly, if I honestly answered, that makes a lot of sense, but nobody does, right? So how to go? Like that's the one question that I thought like would be.
Yeah, tell me about yourself. Tell me about your strengths and weakness. Tell me about a time you had a hard time or a challenge.
Well, challenge, at least I understand, because that's how you dealt with challenge. But the weakness part, that's the one that I'm always like, I don't fully even understand, like, because nobody answers that honestly.
Yeah. So the reason I ask that question, and it's not like I ask it all the time. The reason I ask that question is to get a sense of a few things. One is sort of the person's self-awareness, right? I want to understand, like, are they aware of either how others receive them or how they project themselves? Are they aware of, are they emotionally aware, emotionally intelligent about, what their shortcomings might be, right? So it's not, so yes, there's a concrete aspect to it. Like, I do want to know if they have what their perceived weaknesses might be, but also, I mean, I'm maybe looking first and foremost to understand like to what extent have they explored that within themselves, right? And are they reflective? It's particularly important for folks that are in management or leadership positions that I found, right? I mean, just the whole EQ thing, super important for folks that are in management or leading or managing other people. And so I would say those are the two reasons why I asked the question. Good answers that I see are answers that are genuine, right? Like you could tell that the person's done some reflection and they've acknowledged some areas where they've either fell short, but they also it's not just, oh, I fell short and that's it. It's like, okay, well, I fell short, or this is one of my shortcomings, or this is where I might not be strong, but here's what I'm doing about it, right? And so if it's just like, yeah, I'm no good at this, and that's it, really the next question is like, okay, well, what are you doing about it, or what have you done about it? Um, how do you adapt, right? So some people are really good at certain things, and maybe they don't want to focus on their weaknesses, but maybe one of their strengths is finding and building teams that augment their weaknesses, right? So maybe it's not about, if you're not good at spreadsheets, right? Maybe you don't need to be, but if you're good at building a team of all-star, data analysts and Excel gurus, then you don't need to be good at that stuff, right? So just getting back to the point, right? The point is that, being able to understand where your shortcomings or your weaknesses might be, and then how you're adapting to that. That's important for me, like as a recruiter, when I ask that question, or I kind of explore that with candidates. So the other thing is like, recruiters ask this question enough to know when somebody's like BSing it, right? And so, I think it goes back to just, doing your homework on yourself and understanding, what you bring to the table. I think also it's an opportunity for you to express, how that relates to the particular job opportunity that you're interviewing for, right? Because that's also within the context of what the interviewer, the recruiter is interested in, right? So if you can get out ahead of that, you're making the job for the recruiter easier, right? And so if they're asking you, and they could phrase it in so many different ways, but basically they're asking you like, where might you not be, where might you misalign with the requirements of this role, right? And they might not say it like that, but that's what they're getting at, right? Because they want to know where you might be a misfit, right? And having some element of misfit it's not like a non-starter. So I wouldn't try to avoid it or pretend like there's no aspects of misfit, because that's what an astute recruiter is going to zero in on. Where's this person a misfit? Because that a lot of times in the early stages of an interview process, like say the first one or two conversations you have with a recruiter, they want to flesh that out, and not necessarily to disqualify you, although it could result in that, but not necessarily to do that, but also to tee up the subsequent interviews. Because as a recruiter, when I'm interviewing someone for the first time, I want to know, the pluses, their strengths. I want to know the possible weaknesses or misfits, the minuses. And I want to know, anything that's unique about the person, and then anything that's sort of just question mark, right? But I convey that to subsequent interviewers, right? And not all recruiters do this the way I do it, but for the most part, you can count on there being some mechanism where they're communicating what they're finding in their interview with you to subsequent interviewers, right? And so when I'm doing that, I'm looking at possible areas of misfit, again, not to disqualify you, but to tee up the next interviewer to say, hey, maybe she wasn't as technical as as she needs to be, whatever, right? Like, and so that'll prompt the next interviewer to explore that angle a little bit more deeply, right? So anyway, long-winded answer. Hopefully that covers kind of what you were looking for, Liza.
Yeah, thank you.
let's see, I'm just looking at the questions here in the tell me what you've been doing since you got laid off. Yeah, that's it's, don't beat yourself up if you have a big gap of unemployment. You're in good company. There's a lot of folks out there right now that are having a hard time. Um, but it is a legitimate question. People want to understand, recruiters want to understand kind of how you made use of that time. So I would try to have a good answer for that. Applying to jobs, what do you think I've been doing? Um, so yeah, so this AI thing, right, with Claude for Sheets, right? This could be an interesting thing that you can share. Like if you implement some sort of automated process using AI to augment and streamline your job search, like that's a little project in and of itself that you can talk about, right? And so that could be really interesting, right? And if you could teach the interviewer, the recruiter, how to do something, maybe they don't know about Claude for Sheets, maybe maybe they haven't figured out a way to automate some of their processes. And if you could teach them something, like I guarantee you'll stand out. Lauren, you had a question about what are your thoughts on using Calendly or something similar to share times with potential contacts, recruiters, or otherwise. I mean, I think it's a great idea. I mean, I think a lot of folks, generally speaking, have Calendly links or Mixmax links that they use to kind of share their availability. If your question is about, like sort of etiquette in terms of how do you share,
Yeah, or does it feel too forward or something?
yeah, yeah. I'm just trying to think. So in terms of etiquette, one way that when I'm proposing a like if I say, hey, hey, so and so, do you want to have a meeting? It could be anybody, right? It could be a recruiter, it could be another prospective client, it could be a prospective client, it could be a candidate or whatever. If they've agreed, like, hey, let's set up some time, then usually I'll respond with something to the effect of, um, I'm free from this time or this. I'll give them like one or two options, and I'll say, but if it's easier, I have some additional times on my Calendly or Mixmax. Feel free to grab a time that works best for you. So I propose options and I make it easy for them to pick the option that works best for them, typically, especially if it's someone that is sort of, maybe in a higher perceived position of power, right? So if I'm soliciting a client, I want to make it super easy for them, right? And I want to give them options, maybe one or maybe two options. And if that doesn't work for them, then the third option is you can look at my calendar, or they could just propose whatever works for them, and I tell them, I'll make it work, right? Just let me know what works for you, and I'll make it work, right? And so you want to make it as easy on them as possible, typically. So that's typically how I do it.
Thank you.
Let's see. You mentioned last time that we shouldn't be talking about weather and that there are job related small talk that you can engage in. Could you provide an example? Yeah. So you could talk about trends. So as a recruiter, I'm always interested in trends. I'm also always interested in what people are seeing out there. I'm always interested in like for example, I've gotten some signals over the past few months that activity among job seekers has been picking up. And again, it's I know it's totally anecdotal, but that is something that's interesting to me as a recruiter, right? If they're shedding any light on any trends that they're seeing. As a recruiter, I like to keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on out there, whether it's from a job seeker perspective, whether it's knowing what the competition is going on with the competition, right? So if you're interviewing with me or my company, chances are you're maybe talking to some other companies out there as well. I'm curious to learn about, what their hiring practices look like, what their response times are looking like, things like that. So if you can share that kind of information with a recruiter, that would be something that would be valuable, right? And it is sort of, trends in terms of the industry or anything like that that's going on. It's news, but it's also interesting and relevant, I think. So that's one example. You could also talk a little bit about, part of it is just kind of deferring a little bit to the recruiter or the interviewer for, letting them lead, right? And you'll find that if they are giving you space, then make sure you take an opportunity, you capitalize on that space, right? If they give you some space to lead, or if they ask you up front, sometimes they'll do this, right? We could start off with, do you have any questions for me, right? Even before they jump into the interview, they might do that. I've done that in some cases, right? And so be prepared to take the lead if they defer that to you, and they might not do it overtly. They might just it might be a little bit more subtle, right? So let's see. Could you talk about jobs that are not getting publicly posted and how to get about being considered for those? Yeah, so in my experience, what I've seen in terms of sort of that how do you say, like those jobs, like I'm visualizing that iceberg, right? Um, those latent jobs that are not yet exposed to the public. And this is something that's interesting for me too as a recruiter, because we're always looking for companies that are hiring or will be hiring, right? So like some of the leading indicators, might be, company gets funding. I mean, that's kind of the obvious. Um, if someone uh if someone in maybe a senior level position has started a new job, they've probably left a vacancy at their old job, right? And so, or if somebody like at a senior level is now looking for a job, they might still be employed, but guess what? When that person leaves, they're going to leave a vacancy, so they'll be looking for a backfill. So those are kind of leading indicators. I mean, those are the leading indicators that we look for as a recruiting firm, right? Because we want to get after it, and try to build a relationship with a client, before they, or at least anticipate it, right? Before they need it. So those are some leading indicators of when a position might be opening up.
Hey, Eric,
Jason.
good to talk to you again. Question around more some of the supposed job postings where there's already a candidate internally that is pretty far along, if not like the candidate that they're actually wanting to go with, but yet I feel like there's some type of company policy where they do go external with the posting, but it's kind of like they just do it for show. What How often are you seeing that, or are there any like telltale signs that this is going on with a particular posting so that you don't waste your time?
Yeah, I was going to get to that point. I mean, the big thing is like making sure that you can qualify so that you're not pouring energy into something that is not going to be fruitful, right? And so, what are the signals? Um, so I mean, to answer your first question, I haven't seen that much because most of the clients that we've worked with have been earlier stage. I think you see that more often in larger companies where they just have larger internal talent pool, and the talent pool may be sort of more mobile in those larger companies internally. And so, one thing that you can think about asking the recruiter is asking them kind of where they are at with the search, and you could ask them, straight up if they're if they're considering internal or prioritizing internal employees as candidates, and so again, I mean, you don't know how the recruiter is going to answer, or if they're just kind of skirt around the question, to try to keep you engaged unnecessarily. But it's a legitimate question, right? And I think if the person wasn't disingenuous, they'd answer truthfully, and that way you can manage your time effectively. But as far as other telltale signs, I mean that would probably be the question that I would ask, is just kind of where they are in their search, and you know if they're considering internal candidates, and if they have anybody sort of lined up for that already. Trying to think if I have anything else to add. Has anybody else seen those situations? I saw some nodding heads a second ago.
So, hi, this is Shiloh. I wanted to mention that in our job search council, we did have a member who, during networking, reached out to a fellow colleague from a previous position. During that networking, she learned that this person was leaving, and that person in the networking session actually recommended the job search council member. And she just got her offer last week. So when we were talking about, the hidden market, I think that's also something we can tap into with people we previously worked with.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes just getting creative about those different angles, right? But yeah, can't say enough
I
about.
was asking the wrong or answering the wrong question, wasn't I? We're still talking about the internal candidates. I apologize.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah, really no telltale signs. Yeah, I would just try to be direct with the recruiter. And it's as much as they are interviewing you, you can interview them as well, right? And try to get a read on, how their search is going, what some of the challenges are. Again, it kind of goes back to like if you could position yourself as a partner with the recruiter, and that extends to the hiring manager as well. To the extent that you can be a partner with the hiring manager and the recruiter in terms of helping them identify and find the right person. And it may be you, right? Or it may not be, and that's okay, right? But to the extent that you can partner with the recruiter or establish yourself as a partner in terms of solving that problem, which is finding the right person, you'll find that the recruiter will be more transparent with you. And if they determine that you're not the right fit, at least you'll know sooner rather than later, right? Because it's sort of this optimization game that you're trying to manage, right? You don't want to be chasing a bunch of false red herring leads, So to the extent that you can qualify better up front, the better off you'll be. All right. Any other questions out there? I know we had a bunch of questions. Yeah, we could maybe cover some of these later or next week. All right. Unless anyone has anything else, that's all I've got for this week.
Thank you. This has been
Thank
valuable.
you.
Thank you all. Thanks for joining.
Mhm.
Have a great week. We'll see you next Thursday.
Thanks,
you.
Eric. Take care.
Bye.
All right,
Bye-bye.
bye everyone. Bye bye.
Mhm.